about ensuring. So I'll take this opportunity to greet the fathers. Um, well, I am Jan Ned, Reverend by title. I'm the husband of one wife with whom I share 25 years of togetherness with 19 years of married life. I'm the father of three children. I'm an ordained minister of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. I am an actively involved PTA. I chair the PTA of a school that has a pupil population of almost 1,000. I sit on two national boards, um, two, nas- two national boards that represent international children's organization, where we provide psychosocial, spiritual formation, and general support. I'm also a member of Cops and Faith, an organization which helps to foster good community relations with law enforcement, where we provide interventions and oversight as a citizens group. I also provide counseling for nonviolent offenders, crisis support for police officers and families affected during times of challenge. As per education, I'm the holder of a Master of Arts degree in Christian education with a minor in counseling and psychology. More than anything else, I see myself as your brother and your friend. Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you very much for sharing with us, Reverend Ned. One thing, I think this evening might be the first time I would have seen Reverend Ned on camera. However, he has been an avid attendee to our forums, so it would be good to hear him share his knowledge with us this evening. After being here for so many of our sessions and having the opportunity to hear from our other panelists and, of course, persons in the audience. I would now like to call on Siobhan Bryan, who would also introduce himself to us and share a little bit about himself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Augustine. Good evening, everyone. My name is Siobhan Bryan, and I am a father and a husband as well. My son is 2 years old, and that has been a very interesting experience. So I would love to share that with you this evening. Not outside of being a father, but alongside being a father, I'm a Toastmaster, so I'm very active in the Toastmasters community. I'm a full-time entrepreneur in which I have diversified myself to offer products and services in my community as well as my country. I'm from St. Lucia, by the way. And I love doing a lot of reading on historical figures. I love to read about historical events, particularly war and combat, because the strategies, the genesis of these events, they intrigue me. It is very interesting for me to delve into why people do certain things. And of course, I love sports. I love following football as well as athletics. And in my time outside that, I love to spend time with my family, going out and doing family activities.
Thank you very much, Brian. And as a young father, we look forward to hearing from you and your perspectives. Last but not least of our panelists is Telesford Lane. Telesford Lane, can you share with us this evening one of our returning panelists? Over to you, Telesford.
Hello, Augustine. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. I think you know my name. I know, Telford Lane. I didn't want to repeat that. I want to keep my introduction pretty short. I am a father of 6 kids, 5 girls, 1 boy. All of them are, well, 1 adult, 2 adults. The others are teen and preteens. I'm originally a businessman, but I have been involved in youth work, youth leadership, health policies, and at the turn of 40, I decided that I will go into more detailed community work. So I have a first degree in economics and psychology. I have a master's in developmental psychology, and I'm presently a post PhD candidate for clinical psychology. So I'm a developmental psychologist, and I work with young people, children, providing psychotherapy. I do private practice under the name of Unwrapping Gifts. So I am also a spiritual father. I'm involved in church work. I think I have more children under the spiritual side than being a biological. Um, my passion is youth work, and there's no greater joy helping to mold young minds so that they can be outstanding in society. And I'm happy to be here.
Thank you very much, Telesford. So this evening we had the opportunity to meet our panel, and I am sure you would agree with me, we have a wealth of knowledge and information in the room. Just some housekeeping rules. We are asking everyone to keep their mics muted unless they are called upon to speak. We will have a couple minutes to the end of the meeting where persons can address questions to our panelists. And if there is a burning question that you do not want to forget, please feel free to share it in the chat. We will be monitoring the chat, and we will be prepared to respond to those questions. For those of you who can, also feel free to open your cameras so we can have an idea of who are the others within this space this evening. So as we start, beyond Father's Day, I would like to call on any one of our panelists. What does this team mean to you when you hear the team beyond Father's Day? Anyone wants to take a shot at it?
I guess that throws me into the fray. At the risk of oversimplification, after Father's Day is essentially the same as before Father's Day. There's a pause to celebrate, and then there's a continuum, and it goes very cyclically. Hopefully, having gone through Father's Day, a little more impetus and enjoyment and greater notion of encouragement would have been received as fathers, and maybe our children might be a little more appreciative of what is. But that mood and tone, we can't depend upon that to do our roles. Our roles are of such that it's a continuum. And sometimes, even after Father's Day, when the usual socks, ties, pins, and like Telesford is somebody with a lot of spiritual sons and daughters, sometimes you have more ties than you need. So usually after Father's Day, I identify myself as Tyrone with a lot of ties in all ways, shape, forms, and colors.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Reverend Ned. Anyone else? Anyone of our other one of our panelists? I like that. Any other Tyrones in the room?
I think to me, I think you guys are better off to define what the team means. Maybe if I should be honest, I think to me it means well, you're going back to the same norm after holding your breath yet another Father's Day. Basically, we look forward, we hoping that this Father's Day or the next Father's Day will be outstanding one, or it will be better than the previous one. and you wait and you look to see what's happening, and then there comes Monday, and I'm back to what I'm doing, and continue as normal.
Okay, thanks for that. So we will share. I will share eventually what we had in mind when the team was selected, but I wanted to get some views from you. So as we go on, well, probably here's a good place for me to share it. So beyond Father's Day, when the team was coined, really spoke to what next? Do we only feel that that's the day that we show a male folk appreciation? How else can we appreciate our fathers and those father figures in our lives? Do our fathers feel appreciated? I was sharing with Richard, the founder of this organization. I'm a part of different male groups. So here in Trinidad, there is a WhatsApp group that I'm a part of that was for fathers. It came out of a parenting workshop for fathers. And there was this long discussion about a father who was feeling underappreciated, and he was encouraged by an elder to continue doing what he has to do in his role as father without expecting appreciation. And in another conversation, it came up, and I was sharing with Richard how I couldn't believe that in a group of 20-something men that nobody saw it fit, in my opinion, to correct that, because somehow that was not computing for me as sound advice. So let me hear, since Siobhan didn't have a say as yet, I will throw it out to Siobhan first, based on that little story that I would have shared. What is your view? And how would you possibly advise said father and gentleman?
That one is a tough one. What I do believe is that very similar to you, Mr. Alto. I'm also a part of a WhatsApp group which we try to bring some young fathers together. And one of the things we were actually discussing as recent as today was the sense of belonging, which more or less ties into how men feel appreciated. What do we do, or what can we do to make these men feel appreciated? And what we settled on as a group was trying our best to address the foundation, because oftentimes in our local circles, we have forums for men. And when you do the postmortem, you look at the attendance, you look at the outcome, and it can be easily disappointing, I should say, because what you may have anticipated may not be the outcome. Sometimes you put in a power-packed program and the men don't show up. But it's not that the men don't show up, first of all, but then we have to look at what brings those men together. We have to be able to speak their language. And oftentimes we miss the mark by not speaking their language, not addressing their needs. And what we have decided as a small group is to focus on building healthy friendships outside of our main goal, which is to bring them together. We want to do activities that foster genuine friendships among men so that men can feel safe. Because leave it to the household, they may not always acquire that mandate as to what they should do in order for the father figure to feel that sense of appreciation. So we need to build each other up as fellow men, do the best that we can, and hopefully that will be the trigger that allows these men to firstly express what their needs are, and to also have a sense of belonging somewhere, be it in our community or in their home space.
Thanks for that, Siobhan. Reverend Ned, you want to take a shot at it? how could we have advised this gentleman who felt underappreciated?
Okay. He would have come to a constituency that he trusted. I have come to realize that a great deal of leadership involves something that is not often spoken about. Cheerleadership. Just reminding somebody that you're in it, you're managing, just press on a little more. Cheerleadership goes a long way. And when it comes from a company of peers, and I like that Siobhan alluded to the fact that healthy friendships, accountability people who know your level. Sometimes you don't say anything, but you change your countenance. As men, we have learned oftentimes not to vocalize too much, because especially when men gather in the same space, like it or not, a lot of times men are very competitive. It's only many of the older men who have gotten to mellow out, and young lions will make their name on putting down some older lions. And sometimes even as we gather as men, boys or younger men are looking for chinks in the armor of the older men. And while older men want to sit and present, sometimes with a declaration of perfection, I have been and I was, we have to meet each individual at their needs. So speaking to the context of your question, there will be times when fathers will feel underappreciated. And especially in the younger years of your children, when your children are very young, they are very parentally attached. You get a lot of hugs and kisses, but then they start to understand a sense of space. So Siobhan, while you're getting those wet kisses at 2, appreciate them. As they get older, you might probably get a high five, a shake, a pong, while they're costing you more, right? Now, I'm not decrying the challenge. I often say to people, pay rent. It's actually the person who pays the rent. The bill is yours. And so I'll say to that young father, you need affirmation groups, other males. And I like that, Augustine, brother, you raised that in that group, they should have supported, been a little more in his corner, give a little cheerleadership, because his children are probably too young to appreciate what he's doing in terms of molding their character for who they're going to become as children. So they're not at that level. So I'll advise, continue to encourage. We don't know the challenges that men have gone through, so always be encouraging, be friendly, engage, and even if you have to hold a man who's slipping or might say a byword or misconstrue a situation, just take him aside and gently, restore him. When I get into men's fellowship, I usually say you must come in as version 1.2, but leave as version 2.2. In that way, your wife wants to send you back to that fellowship and your children are excited. You go home as Superman, you go super husband and super daddy. So keep the encouragement up. He might have, in that moment, just needed a word of affirmation because his children would have been taken. And sometimes we forget that in parenting, it is a support situation. So his spouse might not have been affirming him as well. So as brothers, we give that affirmation and we let the brothers know that we got to press on because it's a process. So I leave it there for now.
Thank you very much. Very insightful, Reverend Ned. I like the fact that, you pointed out within the male space, there is this sometimes unspoken of competition. And you went on to support what Siobhan would have encouraged in terms of those healthy male relationships in which we encourage each other to be better, do better, and letting each other know that you are not in this alone. Sometimes, and oftentimes, something we fail to do because we do not speak about those things, those feely, touchy things, or those touchy-feely things, as we say. Tell us further. To you, I will share a different scenario, very similar but different. So also on Father's Day, going through my phone, I saw an update from an associate who is saved on my phone, located here in Trinidad as well. So he is one of those, I believe he's probably in his mid-30s, but he is one of those. He's not a social media, what this called them, influencer, but he's out there. So he's very much into social media, TikTok, the works, presenting himself. So he had this rant, I would call it, I probably should choose my words wisely. Let me take back that. So he had this complaint on his WhatsApp updates about his daughter not being appreciative of him for Father's Day. And the fact that for Mother's Day, she ran him down to get money to purchase stuff for the mother, but not as much as a Father's Day greeting for him. So this one, unlike the WhatsApp group, while we are not friends, we have communicated in the past, and I happen to be aware of the daughter. Well, I am hoping that is the daughter he was referring to, because to my knowledge, he has one daughter. And based on my memory, she should be no more than 10 years. So I told her, because it connected with me, because it reminded me of the earlier conversations I would have been having. And I said, well, as a father, you have a duty to inform her and to train her what is the correct thing to do. Because I remember following the conversation with Richard, I believe it came up in the conversation with Richard, but it came up also with others as I was discussing this disconnect. And, you know, we always hear about the socks and the ties and the pins. And in truth and in fact, and I will ask you all that question soon, but before I get there, I spoke to him about, okay, you put it on social media, but you could have gone to your daughter's room, because I would have been to his home once. And once he's still living there, you could have said this, you know, show her, teach her the right thing, because that's the only way she would learn to do better, especially at her age. As I'm saying, she is a primary school child. She is about approximately 10 years. Telesford, what is your view on that?
Before you become a father, you are a boy. And as a boy, we are raised differently compared to girls. Girls tend more time to have the attention, the affection, the affirmation, the acceptance, the affection from parents compared to boys. Boys are told to suck it up, to be a man, to be a superhero, and then we begin to value ourselves based on what we can do for others. And if we want to talk about the first 18 years, and then we can now jump to 60 and above, and we end up with a lot of men that are bitter, that are angry, that are resentful. His wife is young, dressed well, is happy, but he is bitter and angry and nagging and resentful and suicidal. And the fact is that as men, we have to understand that, for me, gone are the days of superheroes. Gone are the days of superheroes. Men have been told, men have been cultured, men have been educated that we need to look after ourselves. We need to look after others at our own expense. And as fathers, we realize that when our kids are 2 and 3, and daddy, yay, my kids are teenagers. I remember when they were 5 and 6. So, daddy, what are we doing tonight? Daddy, what are we doing this weekend? Where are we going to which movie? And now at 21 and 19 and 17 and 18, the only how they ask me, what are we doing, is when their plans with their friends fall through. And that is normal human growth. We are raising our kids to be adults. We as fathers, we used to do that when we were them. And now they're growing and they have grown and they're doing the same thing. It's a normal human development. And so men have to come to the point where I am a father, but before I became a father, I am sufficient, I am enough, I am deserving. I have all that I need so that I can transcribe that or transfer that to my kids. And so when your kids begin to drift away and they begin to grow in independence and they begin to talk about their family, you do not feel left out, you don't feel abandoned, because the issue is whether my kids like me or not, I am their father and I want the best for them. That is unconditional. Me wanting the best for my kids is unconditional, whether they love me or not. And so when if I sacrifice one of my harm so that one of my child could live, and the child grows up to be ungrateful, it must not put me to the point of being suicidal, because if I give you my harm just to prove to you that I'm a good dad, then you're not making it. I'm giving you my harm because I love you. And even if you don't appreciate it, that is fine. I am comfortable, I'm happy, I feel enough, I feel sufficient as a dad that I've done my best. And I think fathers need to come to the realization that you're a father, it's a lifelong journey. We make the children and not their mind, but we have to do our best. We have to better our father so that our sons can better us in their parenting. And when our kids begin to grow and to develop and to move on with their lives, we can also move on with our lives knowing that we have done our best. But if you're looking for praise and gratitude and affirmation from our kids, I'm sorry, most men or some men are going to be left bewildered, because that's not going to be coming.
Interesting. It leads me to another question. And if anybody wants to weigh in on what Telesford would have said, feel free. So there is a school of thought that men generally are becoming too needy. So I've heard that said before, the modern day man is becoming too needy. Whereas before, as was said, I have my view on it, but before I share my view, before I share my view, let me hear what are your views. And based on what you said, Telesford, I can see, and I don't want persons in our audience going away with that perception. It can be perceived in a way that I don't feel that you mean it. So I'm going to leave that question there. Do we feel that our men, our modern men, are becoming too needy, wanting this appreciation, wanting affection from our loved ones and our children, while our fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers, as was said by some of you earlier, suck it up and just went on, did what they had to do and deal with it? Anybody wants to take, or tell us what? Anybody wants to take a shot at that question?
Yeah, I would like to. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Siobhan, and then we'll go back to Telesford.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. A couple months back, some friends and I were discussing an issue relating to a particular community of people. And one of the guys just rose up and said that, what we need to get things back into perspective is toxic masculinity. And that kind of raised my eyebrow a bit. Like, why does toxic masculinity all of a sudden becomes a solution to the world's problems? And, just to be on the right side, I did some searching for myself to find out what the definition of that is. And I was very surprised to see that a lot of our search engines regard toxic masculinity as what most men regard as being a man, which is embracing your manlyhood and standing up and being firm in certain values. But there seems to be a very fine line where persons have perverted you retaining your values as a man with those that are naturally toxic in nature when it becomes a bit excessive. And that speaks to men who do not have that part of them that is willing to compromise, willing to understand, and willing to embrace different ideas. Now, when it comes to our emotions, I think that it is a step in the right direction. But then again, it feels like external pressure or external bodies are not ready for the change that they have always been asking for. Because there's been too many persons, too many schools of thought that indicate that men don't communicate as much. But when we do take the step to communicate, people or society is like, whoa, 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 okay, this is too much. And I think that it's a case like that. I don't think men are becoming needy. And speaking on, well, my experience, I have come a long way from just having my expectations and imposing it on persons to actually saying what is on my mind. And it has brought a great level of clarity. It has brought a higher level of peace. I feel more confident with myself as opposed to the version of me that kept those feelings inside. So if we as a generation of men encourage that level of expression, then it becomes normal. But the fact that it's rare right now, it seems very strange. So persons start to attach all terms to it, like, I think this guy is on the fence. I think this guy is very emotional. So that's what I believe it is.
Thanks for sharing that, Siobhan. Tell us what.
I was doing a psychotherapy session with a couple and their 18-year-old son. And so when it was his turn, I said, so can you tell me what are your challenges? And he says that my father is not emotionally supportive. The people who says that men are becoming too needy are the people of way back who told men not to express emotions, and those who treat men as being void of emotions. And so society has put men in a very peculiar place where we are now trying to define who we are when the basic definition of men still stands. Because stop, don't cry, only girls cry, only girls talk too much. But then when he gets married and he doesn't talk, then that's the big problem. And so men have to hold their own to know that one, just as though I'm mental and spiritual and physical, I am also emotional. And in order for me to be an healthy man, I must recognize and accept my emotions rather than stifling them, suppressing them, and denying them. It's only going to lead to problem later down the line. And so that 18-year-old boy was pretty shocking to me, at least, because when I was 18, at his age, I didn't even know what emotion was, and I can't even say whether my dad was emotionally supportive or not. But this is modern time, and he's aware. And in order for him to grow up to be an healthy father, he must be able to express and validate his emotional feelings or his emotional side.
So much information was shared there. So I would share an experience. So in terms of it made me think about my father and if he was emotionally supportive. So my father wasn't a talker. I am known to be a male talker in my family. And but what I can remember from ever since, my father, I think if I think of emotional supportiveness, he was always there. So my mother was a very, what we call, scornful person. So I remember after some long August vacation, I would have contracted well, it wasn't ringworm, it was some something common to ringworm. So it was eating away at all my hair. I had to stay home for a couple of terms from school because, of course, it was contagious and they couldn't find what it really was. And all through my life, from childhood to teenage, even to adulthood, there was nothing that I ever had that because my mother was so, although me and my mother were tight, because my father was so, because he was who he was, we would share the same bed. And that to me was so much different to my mother. From the time hey, stay in your room. You're not going to come here and spread this to the rest of the house. But I had pox. I slept on the same bed with my chicken pox. I slept on the same bed with my father. He didn't flinch. He didn't. So, in that way, my father has always been there and stable. As I said, I can't remember my father ever saying, Atu, I love you. But those little things showed me he has always been there. So in terms of emotional support, I think I felt kind of secure in terms of, as you rightfully said, in terms that if necessary, he would be willing to make that sacrifice. I want to go back, however, Reverend Ned, you wanted to say something before I go on? Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to remind us that actions speak louder than words. We're in a dispensation where the verbal man is seen as the more appropriate man. To those who would have had to deal, especially with church history, there was a part in the church's history where even as a man, you had to be robust. Even as an academic, that was part of the notion of when they came to arrest Jesus and they saw him, they drew back because they were expecting an academic who might have been pale, out of the sun, skinny, that kind of notion. I'm saying that to say this much. We must contextualize that at our age, the fathers are coming from a different generation, not very far removed from colonial tasks, colonial situation where the male, especially in the work environment and the social environment, were emasculated in a number of ways. You speak to your grandfather and you realize that he held the same designation at his job for 25 years. That speaks to stagnation. But when you speak to the older men, they will let you know that complaint, you wouldn't give your oppressor the dignity of hearing you complain. So they sucked it up. And even if we peel the layers further back during slavery, public flogging and humiliation, men would say, you'll get a pint of my blood or you'll get a drop of my blood before you get a drop of my tears. So it is predicated on a long social history that we are gradually eroding. Now, be careful of what you ask for because you just might get it. The modern contextualization of the talking man is who's willing to listen to the talking man? Because like I explained earlier, usually in masculine environments, men are checking, testing, measuring. My father used to say, you'll be weighed in the measure and found wanting, or it's better to be taught a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. So men usually remain reserved. And we must remember that a lot of our fathers and grandfathers in our dispensation would have left academic institutions very early. And so they weren't necessarily eloquent men of words, but they got into labor-intensive fields as soon as they were strong enough, a lot of farming and, doing all of that. So they had ambitions for their children and their grandchildren that in many instances, they verbalized just in short bursts. Oh, this is my doctor, this is my lawyer. The trajectory they couldn't help with. And so even dealing with notions of homework, your father would very likely distance himself than unveil the fact that he wasn't good at multiple times table. So in situations where there's going to be a measure of erosion, people step back. So I learned when you're doing adult education, you stay away from a lot of evaluation and tests. Big people don't like to get an F. That's good and dandy with the younger ones. And so we have to balance the contextualization of these notions. So when we hear the expression that men are becoming more needy, it's not that men did not have emotions, they were bridled in a certain way. And now that you're hearing them, the question is, you ask for it, but are you willing to treat with what is now being unveiled? And that is something we will have to deal with as fathers, because our sons are hearing it more than we do, and they are going to seek for answers. And in many of the social spaces, they'll say to you, okay, go ahead and cry. But when you're done crying and them boys rub you raw, your sense of self-concept can be challenged. And so I understand the psychosocial notions, but I'm also looking at the reality that sometimes when you open your mouth, you might be withholding those words so long that you don't phrase them properly. So daddy might be short, he might be blunt. He might say to you, you're messing up the family name, you're an idiot. But what he means behind that is, I've been trying and investing in you for you to better and go beyond where I have gone. And you have more potential than I have, son. You can press on. But he is not verbally necessarily competent because he might not have heard it from his father. So even though he was not taught, he didn't hear it, he has no template, you know. So even in the midst of this struggle, we have to be able to, in some measure, use an interpreter. And that is where counselors such as Mr. Lane comes in, to be able to contextualize and to help the younger dude to understand that, hey, daddy's not touchy-feely, but he's going to back you where it matters. He's going to be your sponsor. If he hears somebody's contending with you on the road, he goes for the old rusty cutlass down at the back shed and he has your back 100%. Before he finds out that you're wrong, he's backing you up. So, yes, the modern man may say a whole lot more, but is the modern woman and the modern child willing to listen? You just might be cutting into your children's TikTok time or your wife's Candy Crush time. So talk if you may, but who's listening?
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. I have some follow-up question, but I want to go. I am paying attention to the time this evening. I want to go back to Telesford to clarify something that he said earlier on, and I'm going to come back to you, Reverend Ned. So Telesford, you spoke about earlier on when I gave the scenario about the male expectation. So if they expect to be recognized and so on, it is something they may have to be prepared to face disappointment with. Am I paraphrasing correctly?
That's correct.
Okay, so it reminded me of what I shared in a couple of forums recently concerning the same scenario. That I also believe that, like when I reached out to the guy who posted on his WhatsApp page, that he needed to teach his child how to show appreciation, because the kind of father that I intend to be is not one. There are some things I must do. Of course, I wouldn't starve you. I might be tempted to, but I wouldn't. But you are going to say thank you. You are going to show appreciation, whether you mean it or not. Because if you don't, then you don't get. So it's something that's going to be embedded in you based on my example and training. So even in our relationships, because some parents are single parents, so a child may have the opportunity to see you in your role as a husband, to see you in the role of a son or a grandson. So I think we must mirror that. when you receive things from others, nobody, your mother isn't obligated to put food on the table for you because she's your mother. Your father isn't obligated to give you. That is his responsibility. But as a child, it is important that you show appreciation. You say thank you. You extend yourself, even if you don't want to or you don't feel to. What's your view on that? Yes.
You're a very smart guy. I mean, you give me no option to agree with you, but I'll disagree with you. We have to aware that we're in the age of child rights. And when I say child rights, I don't mean that the rights weren't there, just that the kids are aware and they understand them. So if you're dealing with a child that is below 10, that child basically operates, that child's morality is basically the parents' morality. Mommy and daddy said this is wrong, so this is wrong. Daddy gave you this, so you got to tell daddy thanks. The difference comes when the child is beyond 11. Where we call adolescent. They're not a child anymore. They're on their way to become an adult. They're not a child, they're not an adult, they're in transition. And adolescents will tell you, if I don't think that you deserve it, I am not going to give it to you. That is their freedom of expression. That's what they believe. Maybe later on they will come to regret it. But the adolescent says, this is my period of identity and purpose, where I try to identify who am I. I'm moving away from my parents' imputed righteousness, and I'm now looking to figure out. Okay, so when I was 10, mommy and daddy says I need to go to bed at 8. Now I'm 13, so I'm gonna ask them, why do I have to go to bed at 8? And this is what we're dealing with. So now we have our child, and this is I deviate a little from the reverend in that the man now has to do a lot of talking, because you deviate from the parent, and you want the parent to, the child wants the parent to know that I am thinking and I have opinions of my own, and this is what I believe. So the child is now bombarded by social media, by the external world, that men are nobody. You don't have to give them anything. You really have to give mommy the gifts. Daddy, they really don't want the gift. The child grows up. He or she is now 13, now a teenager, and everybody in the house hears when mommy gave daddy the last $1,000. And everybody hear that she has to get it back by weekend because he promised to bring it back by weekend, and she doesn't have any more money. But then everybody in the house sees daddy gave his last $1,000 and walked to work for 2 days and said nothing about it. And so when the child now decides, well, do I become public in my affection to daddy, or do I come public in my affection to mommy? And this is the way they look at the parents, and this is the way society teaches them. And they realize that, you know what, I growing up, I'm now 15, and for the past 10 years, society just make a big fuss about Mother's Day. So Mother's Day is it. Society really don't create a scene about Father's Day, and then daddy really don't talk about it. So let's downplay Father's Day. So these are the conflicting values that especially parents and fathers need to talk to their children about, as to what is important and how do you go about expressing certain things, especially when society is trending along certain narratives. But then the child has the right to say, and teenage kids will tell you. So I have, I think one of my biggest problem, but I really don't think it's a problem, but I think one of my biggest challenges is to teach my kids to be assertive and to stand up and speak. And when they stand up and they speak back to me, man, did I make a mistake here or what? So the issue is that kids will always tell you, you're my father, we want to do it. And the tone of voice is incorrect, the attitude is incorrect, but logically, that's the fact. You're the dad, you have to provide it. Who else is going to do it? But the way it comes over, it comes as disrespect. And I think that fathers need to come to the place where fathers are going to grow up. In Guyana, I don't know about other parts of the world. In Guyana, there are a lot of boys that grow up where their father is doing one type of business. And when those kids, especially boys, become of age, well, I don't want mine go like my father. I don't want to be a farmer like daddy. I don't want to sell spare parts like daddy. I want to go and be a lawyer. Or I don't want to be a lawyer like daddy. I want to go into farming. And these are the individual rights and privilege that kids must be afforded. And as parents, as fathers, we must be mature enough to say, I have done my best in parenting my child, and now I am leaving it up to their independent mind and the guidance that I have given them to make the right choices in life.
Thanks for sharing, Kelly's father. Siobhan, anything to add?
I just want to concur with Telford's sentiments, and yeah, I'm definitely always looking over my shoulder because my son is now 2 years, and I can see by his gestures, you know, based on the way I communicate with him, this boy doesn't always take my commands and directions. So I always have at the back of my mind that, you know, he's 2 now, but what will happen when he's 10, 15, etc. So I'm just doing my best to lay down that foundation to encourage him as much to be as assertive as possible, because I want that when he does reach of age to communicate clearly, that he has that level of assertiveness that will not cross the boundaries and, you know, will make me proud one day.
But you have to be careful for the backfire. It's gonna come, eh?
I'm definitely bracing myself for that one.
I would like to query. Brother Lane, you said that you disagreed with the Reverend, and I'm not sure where we disagree.
No. I disagree with the fact that you're really very eloquent when you made the scenario of daddy might say, boy, you're an idiot, and then you give a long eight sentence paragraph to say what he actually meant. And I'm saying, then give your son that eight sentence paragraph and let him know what you mean. I think you're Guyanese, yes?
Yes, I'm Guyanese. And
so in Guyana, there's a lot of domestic violence and there's a lot of killing of women. I've talked to countless men who believe that nobody listens, nobody hears them, and they're tired of sucking up their pain. And so what happens? They act out, they beat, they kill, they own women, they mistreat women, and all the so the adult male, basically the only female partner the adult male has that he can go and get some support and feel good about is his mom. He runs into some problems with his wife, he goes to his mom. He runs into some problem with somebody else, he goes to his mom. Men, and I heard, I think you mentioned it earlier, men are men's worst enemy. Men are men's worst enemy. You tell a man, as a man, you tell a man your problem, and the first thing he's gonna do, he's gonna laugh you. The first thing is you're gonna laugh you. You tell me I have a relationship problem, you're gonna tell you, I tell the girl, the headache. And so that man, the only person that you can go to that will kind of listen and help him is his mom. And I think that has to be aware of the challenges that our son faced and help them to talk. If you don't want to talk to me, talk to your uncle, talk to your cousin, talk to your grandfather. Grandfathers are great figures for boys because boys think that daddy is too harsh, so they can go to grandfather and talk to somebody. But I think it's important that, so that's my disagreement with you, that the traditional man hardly talk, but now he has a modern son, and his modern son wants him to talk.
I don't believe that we disagree at all. I gave you the way it's verbalized, and I'm giving you the actualization of how it should be delivered. And I was asking that mediators such as us as ministers, you as a counselor, when these contextual situations come, a lot of times it has to do with misinterpretation. One generation had one value system, the new generation has a different value system. We are able to straddle those two stages. So we become essentially social interpreters and translators. So yes, what I would say is that the second bit that was a little more eloquent is what Daddy should have said. When I was speaking to Daddy's competency, he might have left school early, and what he verbalized in summary, what he's trying to say is this: I have had to diffuse a number of situations between siblings sometimes, especially family situations that are charged. And the people are not really disagreeing. What is happening is somebody feels that they're not heard and somebody's not able to verbalize. And when people don't see themselves as competent, I made this point. They speak from a bundle of emotions. It comes out gruff. It comes out insensitive, but it's actually a bundle of care that is in there. The reason why Daddy's angry is because he knows that there's more in you and better that can be done. So we're not in disagreement, brother. It is contextually, I was just trying to straddle the two. And the reason why I raise it is not to be contentious. As a communicator, I'm worried that I don't verbalize exactly what I'm thinking. And so you left me with a gap that I had to double check. And I trust that I would have clarified. We are on the same page.
Sure.
Thanks for that discourse. It actually made me remember and go for a pen to write down a question that I had, Reverend Ned, about your earlier statement as well. So, and I think it links to the discourse just now. I have found, and you can, any one of you can feel free to disagree, that it is said that women process things faster than males. It may not be an absolute. I don't always like these absolute statements when it comes to gender and just gender issues. However, I would have found in my family that while in a professional space, the men are excelling and in academic fields. So I'm not talking about being laborers. So they are thinkers, they're innovators, they are planners, they can do things. I've seen it even in social groups. So you might see it in a voluntary group, I might see it in Toastmasters. You know, they are very eloquent. But when it comes now to dealing with issues of the heart, or those emotional issues or issues with family. So I can speak to for myself. As I said before, I can be very verbal. But with my wife and I recognize when I'm tackled with an issue, I need a minute. And my wife doesn't always appreciate that I need a minute to process, because to her, in all these other spaces that she sees me, I'm able to process and deal with these things. So it brings me back to what we were previously discussing. Is it because as men, we don't have that frame, we don't have that reference, or we are not accustomed to dealing with these emotional issues? So while if we're working on a project or planning something else outside of things that we are connected to emotionally, we are able to respond quickly. But when it becomes that, with that emotional connection now, we need to process it in an effort to ensure that we communicate well. Because oftentimes, when we are forced into situations to communicate, we are, just what you're saying, the Reverend Ned, too short, we might come off a bit rough, and it would be misinterpreted, and all those things. What are your thoughts on that? Any one of you?
It has been a challenging area for me. And I think as men, we must never allow women to pressure us to speak immediately. I mean, I don't want to say for heaven's sake, but for heaven's sake, do not allow women to pressure you. Women, because it's emotional, it's hot. And I need a response now for them. But the same woman that needs a response now, if she's a CEO or a president for a country or a manager, she takes time and she processes information. The same thing like men. And that is what I do because I understand that women in academic and professional life process information just like men. So why is it now that when we're dealing with emotional matters, you want it now, and because you're not responding to me now, you're ignoring me or you're downplaying it, or you don't think I'm important? No. Let's go back to when you're in the office and you have all this information and you need some more to process it so you can come with a sound decision. Yeah, that's what I'm doing all the time because this is what men do. However, I must admit also that when women speak, especially my daughters, I have to figure out, one, is it that they're telling me so that I can solve the problem, or is it that they're telling me because they want to tell me? Being a father, I like to solve problems. So you're having this problem, let's go and solve it. But Daddy, I don't want you to solve it. I'm just telling you what my experience was. And for many times I jump to solve the problem when the woman is just sharing with me. And then there's sometimes when I believe that she's sharing and she really wants you to go and fix it. and it still baffles me. I don't know when I'm going to get over this, but yeah, that's my reality.
Thanks for sharing, Tennis Father. Devon, anything to add or take away from?
Yeah, I always believe that these notions are sometimes just expressed in a one-dimensional case, but you all I've learned as a young leader is that different leadership styles call for, or you require different leadership styles in different situations. So whereas there are some situations that might prompt you to give a response off the bat, there are some that would require you to take a minute or two. Like for example, my son, he's 2, and if I see him near one of my kitchen appliances, I'm not going to call his name softly. I'm going to shout and I'm going to run and grab him and probably send him somewhere just to get him out of danger. But then when I do that action, sometimes I look back and I'm saying, I could have done that differently. You know, maybe I could have actually spoken to him. Maybe I did not have to hit him right away, or, enforce a type of punishment. And I think that, part of the process is being honest with yourself, because there are some times where, even as a husband, I make very impulsive decisions. I sometimes make decisions about financing, and I'm looking at the 1 to 5 day period, but not maybe the 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month. And I just had to come to a point where the decisions, I started to filter out the decision making to assess how important is that decision, how much time do I have to make that decision, and how is that decision going to impact myself and my family. And I use those guidelines to basically assess how I respond to those decisions. Because there are decisions where I've taken, for example, trying to invest in something or trying to sell or buy something. I need some time. I might need a couple of days or so. But for the majority of decisions, I tend to be very impulsive about it. Some have worked to my benefit, and some have been not so beneficial. And I've had to be very honest to myself to express to my wife that, okay, maybe I needed some more time. And maybe that's an aspect that I would encourage any man who's going through to try to foster. Because I know sometimes we come to the table and we say, okay, baby, honey, I made a bad mistake. And all you're anticipating is the eye rolls, the I told you so, and it's it's sometimes not the best feeling, but I always see humility in relationships, humility in communication as a strength, as opposed to a weakness and feeling that you're wrong. So practice makes perfect, and that's what I would encourage men to do.
Thank you very much for that, Siobhan. So I see in the chat we have a comment by Kelston. Kelston, do you wish to expand on your comment?
Yes, please. Why not? And thank
Sure,
you for
go
giving me
ahead.
an opportunity to expound. I was thinking, I was listening to everybody share their bit, and I am thinking here that everybody's coming from one or two or three different level of academics, and we have people coming from various walks of life and involved in various things. And I'm thinking that for centuries, probably thousands of years, we have men who have been in various societal classifications such as middle class, upper class, lower class. Then we had men who served as servants. We had men who are coming out of colonialism. We have men who are coming from the colonizer's perspective as well. And we have men coming from all these different perspectives. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, how does some of the men in some of these classifications see fatherhood? What are some of their philosophies? And in order for us to be able to clearly communicate to a man, we must know where he's coming from, what are some of his philosophies, and that kind of thing. Personally, I grew up in a home where I did not know my father, and I still don't know him until now. And but I think he was a great guy. And my stepfather was very uneducated, but he was a disciplined man. He was so far behind in terms of academics that somebody had to actually write his name and trace it so that he could learn how to sign his name. And I'm talking about it. I know him since he was in his early 30s, right? That was when he got together with my mom. But when I really got to know this guy, he was a great guy, a very, very disciplined person, a person who is absolutely diligent, and he had great philosophies. He was not a Christian at the time. He had no children. He had only stepchildren. And coming from a home where he did not have a father of his own and much of men to give him guidance, I think he did a great job as a guy. And so, well, I'm thinking that when we're talking about men and when we're talking to men, we must get where they're coming from, where they're at, what are their philosophies, and how do they deal with this or that situation from that classification and from that perspective or point of view. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing. Kelston, does anybody want to comment on what Kelston would have indicated? Okay, Reverend Ned, I see you.
I believe Kelston is speaking to something that I raised just now, especially as when I clarified with Brother Telford there. Needing mediators sometimes to clarify, people who are generationally apt or people who can understand the background. A lot of times people are taken out of context. And that is why even when someone who was a student of psychology as well, you see some notions that are not primarily germane to our realities. And so sometimes you try to contextualize and help people along. So to the question that or the proposal that Brother Kelston just raised pertaining to people at their levels. We try to treat family as generic, but the truth of the matter is every husband knows his wife, every children know their father in a more intimate role than any psychologist, sociologist, police officer, or some such person. And as we look into that context, that is essentially the training space. That is the space where primarily they'll glean from. That is not negating that there are other influences such as schooling and your peer group and such like. So looking at where somebody's coming from, their influences, those who they align themselves with, will help to give us a sense of their context. And it's not that we need a sliding scale, but we need to be sometimes a little more compassionate or ask for further information when you hear a man say something. And that is why I raised the illustration where Daddy gave a one word and I kind of unpacked it in 8 lines. And that is what Kelston is asking about the levels, the stratifications. We have to be careful that we impose our ethos, our worldview on somebody's context. So we have to have them explain their context a little wider.
Thanks for that, Reverend Ned. And you know, I totally agree with being appreciative of where someone's coming from, their cultural differences, their values and belief systems, etc. But that's one of the, not but, I believe that is one of the benefits of forums such as this, because just like social media that our young people are privy to, listening to all sorts of information, I tend to try to keep up with social media because I engage with young people a lot. So I want to be in the know when I'm engaging with them. And still sometimes up to as recent as last week, I'm now familiarizing myself with TikTok and getting into that TikTok world, of course, to promote some of the organizations I'm with, etc. And I saw something that was so, I'm not going to share it here, but it was so taboo to me that actually was out there as the norm, you know, like a normal thing. Somebody's telling somebody to do this. And I mean, growing up in the Caribbean, that would be like, if you believe it, you believe it. And if you don't believe it, it will be foolishness. But this person appeared to be American, and they are actually convincing persons to do it. And I went through some of the comments, 1,000 and something likes, and I'm like, wow. In this day and age, with all this information, people are still so superstitious. And that was surprising for me. So I'm saying that to say that it is important that we provide good information. Because while there may be various cultures, there may be various value systems, there are core things that I think is useful to you in spite of where you are or who you are. And forums like this allow us as men to come together and have discussions, because something simple that you may have said to me here will give me the opportunity to reconsider a value system that I had or a perspective that I would have had. So those are the benefits of discussions such as these. We are nearing 7:30, which is going to bring us to the end. Does anyone within our audience wish to ask a question before I call upon our panelists to give their closing words? So I take it that there are none. I didn't get to show my video this evening, but I guess that's a good thing. That means the discussions were healthy. So I would end with asking each of you, as we think beyond Father's Day, Reverend Ned Telesford, I believe Siobhan is back in the room. He may have gotten bumped off. Oh yes, I see you, Siobhan. Let me spotlight you again. Yes. I want each of you to share with us what is your ideal Father's Day present, or what would make you feel appreciated as a father? So I will start. Let me repeat it one more time. What is your ideal? And I hope your children, significant others, those that view as fathers, this is being recorded, so we're going to share it on our Facebook page. So look out for some of the, think about what you want for next year in your response, or even for Christmas or before the year is out, who knows? What, as men and fathers, is your ideal Father's Day present, gift, or something that will make you feel appreciated? Siobhan, you want to go first?
Sure. I think at my stage, I'm starting to embrace the idea that less is more. So for me, my ideal Father's Day is feeling that sense of appreciation from my family and just having the level of gratitude within me to see the fruits of my labor, the stuff that I do on a daily basis, which I might not consider a grand task, but just seeing that my family is happy, my children are taken care of, that to me brings a lot of gratitude. The practical aspect of Father's Day, of course, I would love a big lunch. I would love that table to be filled with food and drinks and so much, like my heart's desire. If I want ice cream, I should be able to get ice cream on the spot. That's that's my ideal Father's Day. But on a long-term perspective, I look towards more things that would bring me gratitude, and seeing my family happy and well in my presence, that would be the best Father's Day gift I can possibly get on that day.
Thank you very much, Siobhan. Reverend Ned?
Thank you, brothers. Ideal Father's Day gift. Challenged in the perspective of things, it is a privilege to be included in someone's process of growth and development as they fulfill their goals. I have 3 biological children, and as a pastor, a range of other children. Sometimes it's can be overwhelming, and it can be funny when somebody's grandmother stands up and say, "Happy Father's Day, Pastor, you've been my father." And it computes a little funny, you know. This is somebody's in the 80s and their 90s. And it has helped me to be appreciative of more than just my own, because society is going to be made up of all of our children nationally and so forth. So just seeing us do better and having a space where we can maximize on our God-given talents, where we can glorify God in our expressions, where we can benefit others, and where we can be the best and the fullest version of ourselves. So in the context of a thing, I don't think there's one thing that is going to satisfy me. So it's just a matter of people coming to fruition and staying comforted in the notion that I was a part of their process and I helped their cross-pollination to fruitfulness.
Thank you very much for sharing, Reverend Ned. Telesford?
Somebody in the group talks about love language. So I'm not fond of gifts. I am not fond of affirmation. For me, quality time. My best Father's Day gift since and so far has been on that day, all my kids are there and we're having a fun time, whether we're having meals together, whether we're eating at home, whether we're doing it at a restaurant, whether we're going for a swim, whether we're going on a road trip. Everybody's there and in good communication with each other. There is no resentment, there is no hurt, there's no unsettled conflict. Those are my best best Father's Day gift. When my kids are there, peacefully and happily, knowing that one man brought all of them together and they're living in love and happiness and contentment. Best Father's Day for me.
Thank you very much. So I guess that dispels the myth that, or the saying by some, that men call for more, but they don't know what they want. So this evening, you all would have successfully shared with me what you all would want and appreciate. And I would share with you as well. I think, so my wife surprised me this Father's Day because I often complain that I am considerate about everybody around me. And then it's always an excuse when it's my birthday or something like that. And well, Saturday, so it wasn't even on the day, she asked me to drop her somewhere. And after that, she took me to the mall because she knows, but I wouldn't say I like to shop, but I appreciate nice things. And for some reason, I couldn't make up my mind what I wanted. So she believed I was shocked, but I normally plan in my mind. So while people may feel, okay, Ato will buy expensive things, it is because I know that I want something. I save towards it and I will go out and get it. So when she said, what you want? My mind was blank because in my mind, I provided all that I needed. But in an effort to show appreciation, I did select things that, that she felt, okay, this would suit you. But so I am grateful that as men, we are now reaching the place where we are sharing our needs and we are changing the narrative that we are here and we want to feel appreciated. So my ideal gift is being appreciated. I like to be appreciated by those that I consider. So thank you very much again on behalf of the Male Empowerment Network for being a part of our discussions this evening. Look out for us. We will be having more. We'll be sharing this on our social media pages. I would like to thank our panelists again for being a part of this evening's rich discussion. I would have definitely benefited from all your sharings. And to all our guests, thank you for making this possible and sharing this time with us. Have a good evening. This brings us to the end of this evening's session.
Have a blessed one, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for being a part, and I'm grateful for those who listened in. I trust that it would have been a fruitful night. Blessings.
Blessings.
Yeah.